Thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Now it's the Democrats' turn. The Democratic National Committee officially set to begin at this hour. Tonight here on the Hill, the president, the protests, the issues, Kamala Harris's big moment, and why the VP's campaign is coming into the convention trying to clean up this moment.
I think it's a mistake for any person who talks about public policy to not critically evaluate how you measure the return on investment.
Plus, Donald Trump, there's him, don't you know? And he is trying not to take a back seat.
Comrade Kamala Harris, you're fired. Get out. You're not doing the job. Get out.
Republicans, though, want him to change the narrative. But can he? Also this evening, Microsoft's deepfake warning. Republicans are talking impeachment. George Santos pleads. And by the way, look who's back in prime time, don't you know? Hillary Clinton. Welcome to the most politically unpredictable show in all of television. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. And welcome to The Hill. 79 days until Election Day, just 11 weeks from tomorrow. But tonight and for the rest of the week, the focus isn't necessarily on the key swing states or the voters who could change their minds. Rather, live look right now, Chicago, Illinois, as the Democratic National Convention set to officially gavel in about 14 minutes from now. A 4-day pitch from Kamala Harris and her party as to why the White House should change leaders but not political affiliations. Harris arriving in Chicago over the weekend after previewing a convention speech that she's going to give in a few days while she was at a campaign stop in Pennsylvania.
There will be a lot that is about what I believe is a way forward, a new way forward, and bringing everyone along in that.
All right, now inside the United Center, you will hear talks of unity, but outside, already chance for change as parts of the Democratic Party take to the streets, protesting the Israel-Hamas war. You can see some of it there, including the administration's response. The United Center in the heart of the Windy City is the house that Michael Jordan built. But tonight, it is seemingly Joe Biden's last dance. Just 29 days ago, the president revealed he was out of the race, succumbing to pressure from party leaders who told him he could not win. President Biden had been defiant that he would not leave the race, but here we are on a Monday, not on a Thursday, and the president is speaking. The president tonight will take a victory lap for what he sees as policy accomplishments. The 46th president will also make the case as to why the 45th, Donald Trump, shouldn't ever assume the Oval Office again. All of this, though, surreal. For some, it's stunning. The Democratic Party celebrating and essentially saying goodbye to the man who used to be at the top of the ticket just a month ago, now moving on to the number 2. Joining me today throughout the hour, Michael Starr Hopkins, Democratic strategist. Ashley Davis is a former George W. Bush White House official. Aaron Perini is a Republican strategist. And Kurt Bardella, NewsNation contributor, Democratic strategist. We'll get to you all in a second. Thanks for being here. But we begin tonight with the Democratic Congresswoman Sidney Comlinger-Dove, who represents parts of Los Angeles and joins us live right now inside the United Center. Congresswoman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Nice to have you back.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, so we're going to hear from President Biden 4 hours from now. He's going to tout his policy accomplishments as he sees it from over the last 3.5 years or so. But you know, Congresswoman, there's going to be some folks watching this who say, wait a minute, he was supposed to be at the top of the ticket, and now he's not. And all of this seemingly happened so fast. And I wonder why Americans should feel proud of the process that the Democratic Party ran.
Well, I think that it's going to be a bittersweet evening tonight, listening to President Joe Biden talk about all of his historic accomplishments, all of the things he's been able to do in just 3.5 years, historic pieces of legislation, historic amounts of dollars pushed into fighting climate change, really taking charge and fighting against for reproductive rights and making sure that we are lowering the cost of our medical bills for our seniors, making sure that he got appointed to the Supreme Court Justice, the first African-American woman. So I hope he talks about all of his accomplishments.
I hear you on the policy stuff, Congresswoman. Okay, I hear you on the policy, and you say it's going to be bittersweet, right? Because this is not the convention that Democrats were going to be planning for. You were on the show just 5 weeks ago, Congresswoman, and here's what you said, and I want to get your reaction to your comments from just a month ago. Listen.
We are standing behind this man because he is the president, and he said he is running for re-election again.
But now he's not. And I wonder if you, along with others, if you feel duped, Congresswoman, with how all of this played out.
No, I'm excited that the Democratic Party has galvanized around Vice President Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Obviously, you didn't want it to happen this way, but I think the courage and the demeanor that President Joe Biden has shown really should be a testament to his grace as an elected official and as the president. And I hope all of us can take some cues from him on how to, move into legacy building gracefully. At the end of the day, we have to work as a unified party to make sure that our ticket wins, and also that we're able to make sure that Democratic candidates running for Congress as well as our Democratic incumbents win.
I wonder how unified your party is, because we see the scenes outside of the United Center there. Thousands of protesters. They're protesting in part the administration of which Kamala Harris is a part of, their response to the Israel-Hamas war. How can you make the argument that this is a unified party when we see scenes like that just outside the arena?
Well, it wouldn't be a DNC, it wouldn't be the Democratic Party, it wouldn't be democracy without dissent and certainly without debate. I would say that some of the loudest voices that have been protesting have been the voices that President Joe Biden has listened to as he's worked to try to push for a ceasefire negotiation, as he's worked to prioritize the release of the hostages. We just learned
Is it
that,
democracy or division, though?
Well, it's debate, and you have to have debate, and sometimes you're going to have dissent. I always hope that it's peaceful, and I always hope that at the end of the day we're still able to focus on coalition building and consensus, but we're never going to be one unified voice on every single issue. There's a spectrum to so many of these policies, but we also know, regardless of some of those differences, that we are unified in making sure that Vice President Kamala Harris and her candidate for Vice President Tim Walz win.
All right. So let me leave you with this. Speaking of policy, the vice president gave her big economic rollout on Friday, and when she was asked, how are you going to pay for all of this, here's what she said. She basically talked about and said it 4 different times, Congresswoman, talking about a quote-unquote return on investment. The Washington Post editorial board, the Washington Post, called it her plan gimmicks. And today, the campaign has seemingly come out and tried to get out ahead of all this, saying, you know what, we're going to raise corporate tax rates from 21 to 28% to pay for all the things that she talked about. Did she fail the first policy rollout? Because it seems like she's having to walk some of this back.
No, she hasn't failed at all. I think she's being pragmatic, and she's looking at this as an incrementalist. I think the issues that she's talked about in her economic plan are bread and butter issues. Child care is very high. The cost of living is very high. The ability to buy a home means you have to be a millionaire sometimes, and medical costs are high.
$1 trillion
Those
debt's
are
pragmatic?
some of the pillars. Well, we are working to make sure that corporations are paying their fair share. We're also making sure that we're building more American jobs, because the more folks that we have that are working pay into the tax revenue base that we use to pay for all of these things and infrastructure that we need.
Congresswoman Kamala Dove from California, joining us from Illinois. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. All right. Michael, Kurt, Aaron, Ashley, hello.
Hi.
So
there's so much to say.
There's a lot to say here. And look, this is Joe Biden's night. It's Monday. It ain't Thursday. Yeah. And that's why I started with the question of why should America feel proud of the process that the Democratic Party ran? Because they kicked him out. They kicked him out of the race.
Well, he voluntarily left. I would say.
After pressure.
You can't make the president do anything that he doesn't want to do at the end of the day. He's the president of the United States, the most powerful person in the world. There's a reason why Donald Trump couldn't plan for this. He cannot conceive of ever walking away voluntarily from power like this. Joe Biden did. The feeling tonight is going to be one of gratitude, because this is twice now that Joe Biden has saved democracy.
Do primaries matter? Primaries never matter again, right?
I mean, of course primaries matter, but when a candidate,
they're not like locked in.
When a candidate looks at the polls and realizes that there's a good chance he's not going to win, and sees Donald Trump on the other side of that and the threats that he poses, and he decides, hey, if I don't give us the best chance at winning, I'm going to step aside so that someone else who can do that. That's amazing. I can't think of many presidents who'd be willing to do that and put their own personal beliefs aside.
Can we go back to saving democracy? Because I think that all of his money dried up because of all the establishment of the Democrat Party told them not to give money to him anymore.
But also small dollars drove.
But also, let's be honest here, you guys are doing a really lovely, altruistic rewrite of history here. Let's be clear. Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama teamed up together, the D.C., Washington insider elites of the Democratic Party, and said, Joe Biden, you're not going to win. And you either bend the knee and you get off the ballot, or we're going to ruin your legacy. So it's very clear that's what was going to happen.
He would have ruined his legacy, though. No one made him get out of the race. He made a decision that he didn't have to.
Okay, the Democrats are the best at turning the screws on each other. I've worked for many a boss before who said we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but Democrats are very good at getting in line when they're forced, and they were
real quick, and then
stepped aside. Imagine all the time Donald Trump heard from Republicans.
Pushes you, but you jump. It still counts as jumping.
He never would have done.
So let me ask you two this, because it happened, and Joe Biden will take a victory lap tonight, and now we've seen the polling. It's just been 21 days, and the lead has gone like that. It's flipped, and in fact, your side is losing, it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said this the last couple of weeks, and I'm not saying it's an Obama movement, but she has a movement with a certain part of her base, as well as women, and as well as with young people. And so we can't overlook that. And it may end in September. And if she continues to do interviews like she did today with whatever she said.
The national numbers in the swing state polling shows Trump tied or slightly down. He's probably going to come out of this. She's going to get another,
2-3 pumps.
If she's walking out +5 on this, then we've got a huge issue here, and we've got to really be looking at fire alarms. But a CBS poll that just came out said that 83% of voters believe that Harris's policies will be almost entirely or mostly the same as Biden's. There's the door. There's the opening. Run through it.
So that might be the opening.
You need a disciplined candidate to be able
But there are Republicans all across the country who can use this for their own election.
So one of the things that we're going to look at later on in the show is the opening. Is for Republicans or for Donald Trump is policy. But is policy going to matter? And is this just going to be an election in which at the end of the day they say, you know what, I like her and I've seen him over the last day.
She's not likable.
Right.
I mean,
I don't know about that. I would say.
In my view, but okay, guys.
Look at the national dialogue.
What are you talking about?
She's likable.
She comes off very phony.
Thousands of people showing up for her.
She's going to have a real problem when she gets to the debate stage, and she does. And I fully believe. No, I believe that women are harsher critics on women than anybody else in the industry. But I will tell you, if she does the excuse me, I'm talking, it comes off as smug and arrogant and not likable. The more she has to be, I'm sorry, the more she's out there, the more people have to force her to do it, the more people are going to see that from her.
To do it.
No, try it.
What we're gonna look at here on the Hill, the breakdown about whether or not the policies actually matter, or if this is just simply about the people. I'm going to get to the map here, or the calendar here in a second. I promise you. Still to come here on the Hill over the next 45 minutes. Chris Steyerwalt joins us live from Chicago. He's breaking down the new numbers, what he sees in the data, what it means for Donald Trump, what it means for Kamala Harris. Plus, will Trump be sentenced before the November election in that New York case? New clues tonight, that might not happen. I will also explain why the 78-day calendar for Trump and Harris is really a lot shorter than that. Mick Mulvaney joining us here on the Hill. And he was normally one of the first, if not the first, before the cameras. Well, today, George Santos, now fighting back tears. How long he's staring down potential prison time. This is the Hill on News Nation. The facts, context, and perspective. When we return. Day, deferring to the court, really to the prosecutors there, on whether or not Trump's sentencing should be postponed. Now, Trump has appealed to delay the sentencing until after the election, November 5th. The sentencing right now is scheduled for September 18th, just 7 weeks before the election. All right. So now I wanted to show you this we talk about on this show every single night, or at least start the show off with the number of days. 78 days rather, until November 5th. As I told you, we are 11 weeks tomorrow until Election Day. But here's what I want to explain to you, why it's actually much, much shorter than that. So let me show you the calendar here for a second. And the reason why I want to go through this is to then sort of have the conversation of how are both campaigns going to handle all this. So here's the calendar, right? Right now, this is the convention, right? It's the DNC infomercial. Republicans have their infomercial. Democrats have their infomercial this week. Next week, we have this week. But what happens, of course, it's Labor Day, right? So then you get the Labor Day weekend. Folks have their hot dogs, their beers, whatever. Then let's go into September. You got the debate on the 10th. But the candidates are probably going to be off the trail in and around this time getting ready for the big debate. We know how important a presidential debate can be if we've learned anything. The first ballots are cast in Pennsylvania on September 16th, possibly the sentencing date for Trump on the 18th. As I just mentioned, who knows if that goes off. Then let's go to October and November. Here's what October and November look like. You got the VP debate, and then it's wide open in October. November 5th is Election Day. So 78 days, right? It's actually a lot less than that. Here's sort of if you were to just throw the calendars away and just sort of add and subtract it all up. All right, so here's where we are. 78 days, right? But you got the DNC right now, 4 days. So let's take away 4 days. Labor Day weekend, call it 3-4 days, whatever it is. Hopefully you have some time off. The debates, 3 days. Then the estimated debate prep, I don't know. We called it a week, give or take. But start doing the math. And then all of a sudden, that's just 60 days left. Really 60 days that the Trump and Harris teams have to try to figure out, okay, are we going to put him out on the trail? Where do we put him? Her? What do we do with her? So on and so forth. Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff, come on in. Hello, Mick. Am I on to something here? I wonder what you make of the calendar and sort of how both of these camps are going to handle all this. You know Trump as well as anyone, so let's start there. 60 days, give or take. How are they going to handle Donald Trump from now until November 5th? How should they, in your view?
Yeah, and I think it's a fascinating question and one that I don't think anybody fully comprehends, including myself, because we've never been through this.
Okay.
We sit here every single night. We talk about on this show about, how should Trump do his thing? What should Kamala Harris do? And we're sort of looking at it through the prism of what an ordinary, to the extent that exists anymore, campaign looks like. This is not an ordinary campaign. This is going to be a true sprint. This is closer to something you might get in a parliamentary system where there's a limited amount of campaign time. On one hand,
that's kind of my point, Mick, right? Sorry to jump in, but that's kind of my point is when you start doing the math or start subtracting, it's give or take 60 days that they have decisions to make.
So who does it help? On one hand, you got to say, well, maybe it helps Kamala Harris because she's unknown. She hopes to stay unknown, as you've already started to see. The more she talks, the more trouble she's going to get into. I was stunned that they actually put out any beef, any material on their economic policy, and all it did was give the Republicans something to sort of target. A huge unforced error there. So does it help her? At the flip side, you mentioned a couple of times the debate prep. Keep in mind, and I'm not joking now, Donald Trump doesn't need to do much debate prep. Here's why. I think he did 3 in 2016. He did 2 in 2020. He's already done 1 this year. He pretty much knows what it's like to sit down or stand up for a presidential debate. Kamala Harris has never done one. She did 1, I think, for the vice presidential race in 2020, but that's it. So I don't think he has to spend nearly as much time prepping as she does. But again, we're making this up as we go because it is a truly unprecedented sort of circumstance.
Mick, hang by here for a second. I want to go around the table real quick. Michael and Ashley, I'll start with you. Let's go Democrat, Republican. Michael, what would you tell the Harris campaign?
I think they really have to focus on the feelings rather than the policy itself. Republicans are going to hit Democrats on policies not being specific, but at the end of the day, I don't think the American public is thinking about policy per se. I think they're thinking about who's going to be a champion for me.
Ashley, what should they do with Trump?
I agree. I actually agree with you, and I also think that there's a lot of emotion right now, and people are excited, and people just want to beat Trump.
Aaron, from the perspective of what Trump's folks should do with him in these give or take 60 days, it's what?
I think that the Trump team should be working the refs. And by working the refs, I mean getting into Kamala's traveling press corps, getting them ginned up, pushing them on questions, working them over and over again. Because if you want to throw her off her mark, it's probably going to come because now she's gaggling. And that gaggling is where you stand outside of whatever event you're at and take a few questions very quickly. That's going to be their best opportunity to start making some waves and plant a question with a reporter, start working the refs.
Kurt, you're telling Harris's team what?
This election reminds me more of a special election cycle. So everything's going to happen quick. There's going to be a short shelf life for things. If you make a mistake, if you have a misstep, move through it quickly. There's always going to be something around the corner to distract everyone, to change everyone's mind. And again, if you make this election about the crazy lunatic things that Donald Trump says, you're going to be on the winning side of this election.
Mick, I'll give you the last word here.
Yeah, Kurt said something very interesting. By the way, I think everybody's spot on, but Kurt said something very interesting. This is close to a special election, and what do we know about special elections? Turnout is the key. It's not getting those undecided voters. It's not getting those low-impact sort of voters that vote once every couple of years. It's getting your base out, which may be why you're seeing each of the parties doing what they're doing.
Yeah. Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks, y'all.
You got it. All right, still to come here on the other side of the break. The official start of the DNC just moments away. So why is one of the most talked about senators not going to be there? And as President Biden is set to take the stage, are Republicans really going to try to impeach him before he heads out of town? Live coverage continues here on the Hill, 4 minutes away. Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. Live look at the United Center in Chicago, Illinois, where the Democratic National Convention is set to be kicking off any moment now. You can see, though, a little bit of the scene that is outside of it as police have been working overtime there, not just today, but in the recent days, as there are pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protesters who are taking to the streets there around the convention center, trying to have their voices heard. As you know, this has been an issue that has followed the Democratic Party, whether it's Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, and now that the DNC is in Chicago, the protests there. But let's swing back, Frank, real quick to the live look, because the events there in Illinois are underway inside the United Center. Tonight, the main attraction, the main speaker, I guess is probably the better way to put it, President Biden, not speaking on Thursday night, rather on Monday night. And he will tout his career. He will tout what he views as his legislative accomplishments while in office. Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, joins us live from Chicago. Chris, you know, one of the things that we've been, joins us live from New York. Excuse me, sir. I never know where you are these days.
I'm elusive.
There you go. Elusive, but the best. One of the things that we've been looking at, Chris, is obviously the polling. Kamala Harris's rise in the recent 29 days since being named to the top of the ticket. And things are starting to shift in her direction. We had a slew of polls come in over the weekend, and I wonder what stood out to you.
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Blake Berman, because we have it right here. We have all of the data that you need to truly enjoy the Democratic National Convention right here. So the Washington Post, ABC News poll, not my favorite poll in the universe, but good enough. It's a good enough poll. And here's the number with likely voters, 51% for Harris, 45% for Trump. That's a lot better than Joe Biden was doing when he left the race. And we can understand why, because Biden was locked in a tie with Trump, basically, and now here she is 6 points ahead. What about the issues? How does Kamala Harris do on the issues with Donald Trump? Well, what's the number one issue for voters? How about the economy? Ah, yes. Well, she's way behind on the question of the economy. You see it there, 37 to 46. She's doing a little better than Joe Biden, but not much. What about the number two issue for voters? Immigration. How's she doing? Not very well. That's 10 points behind on the number two issue. So she's behind on the top two issues for voters, and poll after poll, she's behind. What's her best issue on the issues? Abortion. And this is a big part of why we see Democrats the way they are. This is really the one on the sort of substance issues where Democrats have had an advantage, but she doesn't have much more of an advantage. Actually, it ends up being less. She only does about the same as Joe Biden. Why is she winning? Why is she ahead? Well, let's think about character and attributes. Let's think about how persuadable voters think about the candidates. has the mental sharpness it takes to serve effectively as president. Joe Biden, 14% Joe Biden. That's not very many people. And on this one, Trump goes down. Harris is way ahead of Biden. That's a 32-point increase for her, and now she's in the lead on that question. But this is the one, and you hear me, Blake, talk about it all the time. I'm forever talking about this one. Understands the problems of people like you. Now, this is the question that decides every election. This is the question that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton on in 2016, that Joe Biden beat Donald Trump on in 2020, and this is the one that Kamala Harris has not a huge advantage, but outside the margin of error and substantial. Just think about it this way. People who care about the issues a lot already know who they're going to vote for. People who have strong opinions about the issues and a strong feeling about which party they're going to support, they know who they're going to vote for already. But for the people that are going on character, personality, and all of that stuff, and we could go through a whole list of other polls where Donald Trump is trailing Kamala Harris on questions of character, of personality, of stuff like that. It comes down to that for persuadable voters, and Donald Trump's in a pickle.
You know, Chris, I was looking at some polling over the weekend. There was the Emerson College polling. And we talked about fracking, right? Huge issue in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris sued Barack Obama and Joe Biden when she was the AG in California. Sued Barack Obama. And when Pennsylvanians were asked, who do you trust on fracking? She's flipped recently. It was only Trump +7. And that stunned me when I was looking at the numbers. And to the point, that's to the point, I wonder if at this point, it doesn't matter, at least for Democrats, what her positions are. They're just saying, you know what, Biden, we don't have to deal with the age issue. That's done. We got somebody in who enthuses us. Let's rally behind her. And Democrats say, we just hate Trump, so let's go. Is that sort of where the Democratic Party is right now as the DNC kicks off?
The way that Republicans got themselves in a pickle on Obamacare, if we think back about the past as prelude here, they saw consistently low numbers for Obamacare. It was mostly unpopular. And Republicans reached the false conclusion that the reason Obamacare was unpopular was that everybody thought it was too progressive, too generous, too spendy, whatever. But they forgot that about 20% of the 60% of people who didn't like Obamacare thought it wasn't liberal enough. And they walked into a quagmire because they went down the path on that issue. If Harris can basically keep the left intact and then nod to the center and say, you can trust me, I'm basically okay. That's how Barack Obama won. That's how Joe Biden won. That's how Democrats win. They keep the base together, and the base gives them room to maneuver and flip-flop on issues like that. And then they can make the outreach to the center.
Chris, hang by here for a second if you don't mind. So how does your guy win if those are the numbers right now?
We've seen before where there can be a split in approval, right? That's kind of what that is. Like, who do you think you're kind of feeling a bit more better about? It's kind of almost an approval style question in a poll where there's a split between approval and who people will vote for. They might not like somebody, but that doesn't mean they're not going to vote for them. They might not say this is a person I want to have a beer with, but it's somebody I think I should lead the country.
And everyone knows what Donald Trump does. And it's very surprising to me, Chris, that her relatable numbers are so much higher, because that's one thing he does really well with, is relating to the Joe, Plumber Joe or whatever, Joe the Plumber.
Joe the Plumber way back when, right?
Yeah, I mean...
he used to, though. I'm not so sure that people buy that anymore.
No,
when he
does, in Atlanta when he's
Is the act stale?
No, not at all.
I think he's probably stale more than the act stale. I mean, everyone knows what you're getting with him. She's bringing excitement.
Yeah.
Well, I think the relate to me question, too, I think that right now, if you are a woman in this country, some of his lines are landing differently today in 2024 than they did against 2016. Remember, Hillary Clinton was so well established, well known, 3 decades in public spotlight. There was already built-in opinion about her, good, bad, or indifferent, however you felt about her. That's not the case with Kamala Harris. So when you're out there using certain incendiary words, that might land differently than it did 4 years ago or 8 years ago.
Or it's baked in and people expect it, and it's a bit more of that like Teflon armor.
But if it's baked in, the number parity wouldn't be so much what it is. And I think the reason why does he relate to people like me?
You're attributing it to that.
I'm attributing it to the gender gap. I think the gender gap in this election right now is indisputable at the second.
Well, yeah, the hard numbers on the gender gap absolutely are indisputable, but I don't think that 7-point advantage for him is just solely based off female vote.
So Chris, question to you, and I was curious what they thought up here. I'll ask you the same one, which is, if that's the case, how does Donald Trump win?
So Republicans keep saying they want Donald Trump to talk about the issues. Stick to the issues, stick to the issues, stick to the issues. I'm here to tell you that would be helpful for Donald Trump if he could stick to the issues. But he's already winning all the voters that agree with him on those issues. Republicans complain a lot about Donald Trump, who acts loudish and kooky and all that stuff, and they wish that he wouldn't, but they're voting for him. 90% of them are voting for him because they do like the issues. What Donald Trump has to do, and that question understands the problems of people like you, and other pollsters phrase it cares about people like you, is an empathy question. And here's Trump's problem. It's always about Trump. It's always about Trump. The Trump show is always about Trump. And he does have an empathetic side that he can show. We've seen him show it. He does have compassion for people. We've heard stories about him being compassionate to people. The problem that is for Trump, Americans have concluded that he is neither trustworthy nor compassionate. He has to try to fix that and show that, not stick to the talking points. Talking points are not going to do it. I mean, it would help because it would be better than talking about whether he had bigger crowds than Martin Luther King Jr. or what Kamala Harris's real ethnicity is. It would be better than that. But what he really needs is to reconnect with voters after a long, difficult, unhappy relationship with about 55, 56% of the electorate.
I also think Trump is running into another problem. I don't think his voters really believe the policies themselves. When you talk about he wants to deport 11 million undocumented immigrants, we all know what that'll do to the economy. When he says he wants to put a 10 or 20% tariff.
I don't think Trump supporters are behind his policy.
I don't think they actually believe that he's going to deport 11 million people.
No, I think
do you think you actually think that a Trump supporter believes that we're going to actually put 11 million people?
I do.
And deport them out of the.
They do not believe
he's going to stop it.
No, but they believe that they like that someone's willing to say it.
Chris, I got to run, but give you the last word on that.
Republicans don't believe Donald Trump's going to deport 11 million people. They take him seriously, but not literally, if we can recall the language of 2016.
All right. Chris Stirewalt, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll see you on our special coverage here on News Nation later this evening. Other side of the break, Alex Capriello, Kelly Meyer joining us live from Chicago. You're watching us here on the Hill.
President Joe Biden live on night one of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Trust News Nation to bring you every story, every angle, with respect for all Americans. Live coverage starts tonight, 7/6 Central, only on News Nation. Every angle, with respect for all Americans. Live coverage starts tonight, 7/6 Central, only on News Nation.
Welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. Live images right now you can see of the protesters continuing in Chicago. This was the scene over the weekend. It's the scene right now as the DNC is about to start, and you can expect this to be the scene for days. Our camera's swinging into the sky, but when it frames back up, you're going to see protesters for not as far as the eye can see, but pretty close to it. Our Alex Capriello live on the ground there in Chicago. Or Kelly Meyer is live inside the arena. We'll get to Kelly in a second. But first, Alex, tell us, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Alex, we'll get to you in a second. Kelly Meyer live for us inside the arena. Kelly, the DNC officially underway. I wonder sort of what it's... Do we have Alex?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep, Alex, take it away because I want to keep these images. I got you, Alex. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. I want to keep these images up. Explain for our audience where you are,
you gotta see this
what you're hearing, and what you're seeing.
Oof. We're right at a park that's about 2 or 3 blocks away from the United Center. This is where the protesters ended up coming after marching from Union Park. We are about as close to the United Center as possible, where you know the DNC is happening, and you can see these police officers in SWAT gear who are now slowly and moving these the protesters that remain outside of this park. The reason that they've had to take this specific action is because earlier today we saw some of these protesters actually breach the barrier established by the United States Secret Service. Some of these protesters wearing masks, getting as aggressive as they were pulling some of these barriers apart. 4 of those barriers actually are right where those police officers are standing. So the point being, a part of this fence right outside the United Center has been compromised. It's just right over here over my shoulder if you are able to see our visuals. You can see part of that fence has been completely ripped down and torn off. SWAT immediately moved in from the left here, coming and facing those protesters head on. We saw 3 or maybe even 4 different protesters get arrested, thrown on the ground, handcuffed, and taken away. That's when other law enforcement started to make their move from the inside of this fence. They basically surrounded the compromised fence, then they moved everybody this way, and that's where they currently stand. If we swing our camera over, hopefully we don't lose our signal, Blake, but you can see all of these police officers in helmets, in face masks, in riot gear, doing whatever they can to actually get the remaining protesters out of the park, I assume, so that way they can fix this compromised fence. But a lot of action here just recently, Blake. Multiple arrests. We're still waiting on a final count. But, yeah, clearly they made some serious damage to this United States Secret Service fence.
So, Alex, when you say it's been compromised, how is that the case? They've been preparing for this for weeks and months.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've seen the United States Secret Service, we've seen CPD constantly patrolling over the past week or so, getting this fence in place. What I can tell you is just basically describing what the fence is like, right? So it's about 10 feet tall, and each slate is about maybe 4 feet wide, and they are connected together by hooks. And so I wasn't there at the exact moment, but I came in shortly after protesters were able to take it apart. But essentially it looks as if they lifted up one of those gates and were able to forcibly remove it. Once at least one of those gates was removed, then a flood of protesters were able to get past, and that's when SWAT moved in. So the fence at this point looks slightly compromised. There's about 3 or 4 gates that are missing. I'm assuming they're going to work very, very quickly to try to get it back and stable, because this is a very public park that, like I said, is only about 2 blocks away from the United Center.
Alex Capriello live on the scene for us today and throughout the week. Alex, thank you. Appreciate it. Stay safe. Meantime, into the United Center now, our Kelly Meyer with a much different scene. Kelly?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Blake. A very different scene. As Alex was showing you that scene outside with the protesters, you could hear the Star-Spangled Banner here inside being sung by the choir. They are just kicking things off in here tonight. We are expected to hear from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and President Joe Biden, who came out on the stage here earlier and said, yes, I am ready to pass the torch. We're going to hear a lot about the Biden-Harris administration as they tout the accomplishments. And a thank you to Joe Biden here tonight is what we are expecting as they kick off the DNC here, Blake.
Kelly Meyer, live in Chicago for us inside the United Center. Kelly, thank you. Other side of the break, Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins us. And what about these deep fakes that Microsoft is warning about? Stay with us. And welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. So Democrats, delegates, and balloon drops won't be the only thing happening in Chicago this week. The tech giant Microsoft hosted an event to warn of the threat of artificial intelligence and deepfakes that it poses to elections. Now, just yesterday, Donald Trump posted some AI-generated pictures to his social media platform, Truth Social, of Swifties for Trump, saying, I accept. At the time, the endorsement suggested by the deceptive images. This has been a thing that we have sort of come to know now as a reality. Donald Trump, some of these images are AI generated. During the primary that didn't matter. Joe Biden ended up, there was a robocall in his voice.
Yeah.
And here we are. And I think it says something that Microsoft felt the need. By the way, they did something similar at the RNC to go to the DNC and say, look, this is a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, I expect to see a flurry of content coming out across social media that is completely made up. That's kind of what social media gets. And right now we have the legitimacy of these social media platforms themselves in advancing some of these things. Elon Musk tweeted the other day a video that was created of him and Donald Trump dancing together.
Him and Trump
It was actually a cute video.
It's a real problem for the election, though, because people don't know what they can believe. And so when we see videos or hear voices now, there's going to automatically be this, can we trust it? Is it real? And let me just say with the Taylor Swift stuff, hell hath no fury, like Taylor Swift and Swiftie scorn.
Don't poke that
was
bear.
a dumb move to make by Donald Trump.
We'll see if she shows up at this event on your screen here at some point this week. By the way, did you see this? John Fetterman skipping the Democratic convention, but says it has nothing to do, he claims, with the protests or his outspoken pro-Israel stance. He says he just wants to spend more time with his kids. Good on him if that's the case. But take a look at this quote about the Pennsylvania senator from his own communication director, Carrie Adams, saying that she doesn't agree with him about his positions. You've worked for a lot of Republicans up on the Hill, and you side with the Democratic senator on this one.
Absolutely. This staffer, for every reason possible, should be fired. As the communications director, your job is to get in line and deliver the message. This is something that will humble everybody. Do not forget the name on the front of that door. That is the person you work for. That is the voice you represent. Nobody was asking for her personal opinion. And if this was my staffer, you would be immediately gone. That's so out of bounds.
Totally, I agree. But also, there's a lot of people that aren't going to the convention. If you've ever been to the convention, they're really bad.
They're hard. I tell this, they're like hard to be. There's a lot of security, especially
and
this
he's
one.
Not
The hotel
up
situation's
for
not great.
re-election. There's no reason for him to go.
In terms of,
No,
the staffer real quick. The staffer obviously was wrong, but she's probably having the worst day of her life and obviously the worst day of her career.
Is he going to fire her?
I mean, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. She went on the record against her boss.
Absolutely. No one should ever do that.
Communications director. She should know the rules of engagement when talking to a reporter.
All right.
We should all wave to Scott and tell him we miss him.
Scott
I'm not going to lie.
We just saw us sitting there next to Leland Vitter. Thank you all. Great show. Appreciate it. Live look right now, the floor of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, which kicked off this hour. You can see they're starting to all gather there in Chicago, and that includes my man Leland Vitter, host of On Balance. Leland, what's it like behind you right now? What's sort of the feel? You're at the RNC. Wonder what this is like.
Slightly more disorganized, and you have where the RNC you had excitement for one thing. Tonight they're trying to split, right? And there's this drama of what is tonight going to bring from Joe Biden. How does the Democratic Party